Good day and welcome to British Mirror, where British politics is served hot, sharp, and occasionally with a raised eyebrow. Now let me ask you something. What if I told you Brussels is quietly drafting a clause that could make Britain pay up simply for changing its mind? Not for breaking the law, not for crashing the economy, just for daring to walk away. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the political plot twist no one ordered, but everyone is now arguing over. Stay with me, because this one has sovereignty, money, Nigel Farage, and a very nervous European Union all rolled into one beautifully combustible package. Quick favor before we dive headfirst into this political pressure cooker. If you're enjoying the way we cut through the noise here, hit that subscribe button and tap the notifications bell. Most viewers still have not subscribed. It costs nothing, takes a second, and it helps this channel more than you might think. Thank you if you have done that. Now, back to the show. So, let us set the scene. Sir Keir Starmer wants a Brexit reset. Not a rejoin, not a reverse, just a gentle recalibration, a tidy-up, a smoothing of the paperwork creases that have left British food exporters drowning in forms, stamps, and the occasional existential crisis at the border. Enter Brussels, smiling politely, nodding enthusiastically, and quietly sliding a clause across the table that says, in effect, if you leave this deal later, you pay handsomely. This, according to EU diplomats, is affectionately nicknamed the Farage Clause, which tells you everything you need to know about who Brussels is really thinking about. This is not about Sir Keir Starmer. This is about the man who treats European summits like open mic nights, Nigel Farage. The clause is designed as a deterrent, an insurance policy, a political mousetrap baited with compensation costs. The logic from Brussels is brutally simple. They do not want to spend years negotiating a veterinary agreement, investing in border infrastructure, training staff, aligning systems, only for a future British government to tear it up faster than a manifesto promise after polling day. And with Reform UK now polling alarmingly well, the European Union is spooked. This is Brussels locking the door before the political party gets rowdy. Now, let us talk about what this veterinary agreement actually means, because this is where things get both technical and deeply political. The proposed deal would remove most of the Brexit paperwork currently strangling agri-food exporters. Fewer forms, faster checks, less cheese sitting sadly in lorries at Dover. In return, Britain would dynamically align with European Union rules on animal and plant products as they are introduced. In plain English, Brussels writes the rules and Britain follows them. For Sir Keir Starmer, this is pragmatism. For his critics, it is sovereignty by subscription. You get convenience, but you pay with control. And if a future government decides that price is too high, Brussels wants a receipt. Here's where things start to feel less like diplomacy and more like a hostage note. Under the draft terms, if Britain walks away, it would have to compensate the European Union for costs already incurred. Infrastructure, equipment, recruitment, training. The bill for setting up border controls that were supposed to be permanent. Imagine cancelling a gym membership and being told you still owe them for the treadmill they bought in anticipation of your commitment. Reform UK and the Conservatives are having absolutely none of it. Nigel Farage has been crystal clear. No parliament may bind its successor. Any such clause would not be honoured. In his words, if Starmer signs this, it's a democratic outrage. And in politics, outrage is never just outrage, it's branding. Kemi Badenoch, leading a Conservative party still searching for its backbone after electoral defeat, has also drawn a bright red line. No deal that leaves Britain under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. No agreement that ties the hands of future governments. This is the Conservatives rediscovering their Eurosceptic voice, albeit slightly hoarser than before. Now, let us pause and appreciate the delicious irony here. Brussels is worried about instability. Britain is worried about sovereignty.
Both sides are essentially saying the same thing from opposite ends of the table. We do not trust your politics not to change. EU diplomats have been refreshingly honest about this. One described the clause as a safety provision to provide stability and a deterrent for Farage and his allies. Another admitted the bloc wants an agreement that lasts beyond 2029. Translation: the European Union does not want to renegotiate every time Britain has a political mood swing. And can you blame them? British politics at the moment is less a steady ship and more a speedboat with several people fighting over the steering wheel while shouting about maps. But here's where the debate shifts from technical to philosophical. Can one government bind another? In constitutional theory, the answer in Britain has traditionally been no. Parliamentary sovereignty means each parliament is supreme. No parliament can pass laws that future parliaments cannot repeal. Yet international treaties complicate this picture. Walk away from a treaty and there are consequences, usually diplomatic, sometimes legal, increasingly financial. So, is this clause unprecedented? Not entirely. Termination clauses exist in international agreements all the time. The government has been keen to point this out. They apply to both sides. They are part of how grown-up diplomacy works. You sign, you commit, you accept the cost of breaking that commitment. But politics is not conducted in footnotes. It's conducted in headlines, sound bites, and visceral arguments about control. And this clause hands Reform UK a gift-wrapped talking point. Britain is being fined for democracy, punished for voting differently, charged for changing its mind. And let's be honest, that argument will land with a lot of voters. Now add another ingredient to this already volatile mix: polling. Reform UK is not just noisy, it's competitive. In some surveys, it's polling significantly ahead of both Labour and the Conservatives. Brussels sees this. They read the same numbers. They hear the same speeches. The Farage clause is not paranoia, it's preemptive defence. Nigel Farage, speaking recently in London, accused Sir Keir Starmer of giving away parliamentary sovereignty and voters' rights. It's a familiar refrain, but familiarity doesn't dull its impact, especially paired with a clause that appears to do exactly what he's warning about. Labour, for its part, is trying to flip the narrative. One senior figure suggested Farage will head into the next election arguing for more red tape, more paperwork, more bureaucracy. That's clever. It reframes the argument. This is not about sovereignty, they say. It's about efficiency. Do you want smoother trade or ideological purity? This is where the battle lines really form: convenience versus control, stability versus flexibility, long-term agreements versus short-term political volatility. And there's another layer here that cannot be ignored: the European Court of Justice, dynamic alignment. These are not neutral technicalities. For many voters, they symbolize unfinished Brexit business. For others, they are simply the cost of doing business with your nearest neighbours. Nick Thomas-Simons, the European Relations Minister, has said legislation enabling this deal should be ready by the end of the year, with implementation by early to mid-2027. That timeline matters. It means this deal would likely become operational before the next general election cycle fully kicks in, which also means it becomes a political football almost immediately. Now imagine the posters. On one side, Labour arguing it has cut red tape, boosted exporters, and stabilised relations with Europe. On the other, Reform UK and the Conservatives warning Britain is locked into a deal it cannot escape without paying a ransom. This is not just a policy dispute, it's a narrative war. And Brussels knows this. The Farage clause is as much about messaging as it is about money. It signals seriousness. It says this deal is not a casual fling, it's a long-term relationship with penalties for walking out. But relationships only work if both sides feel respected. And here's the risk for Sir Keir Starmer. Even voters who like smoother trade may bristle at the idea of future governments being financially punished for changing course. It feels, to many, like a challenge to democratic choice. At the same time, businesses are desperate for certainty. Exporters want fewer forms, not more philosophical debates about sovereignty. Farmers want speed at borders. Food producers want predictability. For them, dynamic alignment might be a small price to pay. So, who wins this argument? That depends on who frames it best. If Labour sells this as a practical fix that saves jobs and cuts costs, it can work. If Reform UK successfully brands it as Britain paying Brussels for permission to govern itself, it becomes radioactive. And don't underestimate the Greens in this equation either. Green Party leader Zach Polanski has already suggested he could work with Andy Burnham, but not with Sir Keir Starmer. Green membership has surged dramatically.